we are going to go ahead and get started. We know there might be some people joining, but we'll get started with the power of yet, helping students persevere in math. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. At Carnegie Learning, we know that math confidence grows through perseverance. And that's why we're really excited today to collaborate with Yay Math. Founded by Robert Adut, Yay Math encourages students to embrace mistakes as part of learning. Paired with our innovative tools and personalized learning experiences, we're helping students to develop resilience, think deeply, and believe in their ability to succeed. Together, we're transforming their math journey, one challenge, one breakthrough, and one Yay Math at a time. I want to make sure to give you all a special note to stick around to the end, because at the very end of this presentation, we're going to be rolling out a challenge where you can win something very exciting. We have a great panel speaking to you today, and I get the pleasure of introducing them. Hopefully you might have had a chance to read their bio and some of the emails that went out in the page that you signed up for this on. So I want to do something other than read their bio to you. I want to give you a little bit of a fun fact about them and tell you their impressive years in education. So first of all, we've got Robert, and he's got 20 years in education. The really cool thing about Robert, and I actually got to see him do this just a minute ago, he does a spot-on Obama impression. He actually taught an entire math lesson as President Obama. Next up is Charisse, and she's got 25 years of experience, including teaching in India. If you're wondering what keeps her entertained outside of education, it's football. And then we have John. He's got 14 years in education. During the pandemic, he actually let students pick out a haircut for him. And I think it might be a decision that he is still regretting. And last but not least, we've got Amy. She's got an incredible 26 years of education. She taught in Malawi, Africa. She wants to make sure that we remember that Africa is not a monolith. Her experience there was uniquely powerful. With a combined total of 85 years in education, this group is packed with wisdom, humor, and global perspectives. So let's dig in. Our agenda for today is packed. You can see that. We're going to start off by activating. Then we're going to explore and develop. We're going to look at what is productive struggle. Let's take a look at it in action, taking that anxiety around math and turning it into confidence. We're going to build student persistence in problem solving. And then we're going to provide you with some tools that support meaningful struggle. Finally, we're going to reflect. We're going to roll out a really cool challenge for you. And we're going to wrap up and let you know where you can find some of these resources and materials that you will see today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Katie. Hey, everyone. Glad to be with you this afternoon. We are going to activate our thinking by giving you an opportunity to strut your stuff. So what I would like you to do is in the chat, I would like you to describe something in your life that you are particularly proud of right now. What is some accomplishment that you have achieved recently? If you'll just take a minute and think about it and just in a couple words, let us know what that was. Cool. Oh, you got twins to college. Man, nice. Holy cow, just beat a rare type of ovarian cancer. Congratulations. Oh, potty trained a 3-year-old. That is, whew. Been there, done that 3 times over. Year 2 of Clear Math Elementary. Hey, Ters. Yes, nice. Working out at age 50. Look at all of these things. Still teaching. Nice. 3 employed college graduates. Amen. A queen size quilt. So as we read through all of these accomplishments, what? Happy birthday, Vernon. Guys, it's Vernon's birthday. Turned 62 today. Happy birthday. All of these accomplishments, what I hope you noticed is that all of these things took work. All of these things were accomplished after some level of struggle, persistence, perseverance. These are the things that we report out on. These are the things that we say, you know what? This is what I'm really proud of. These are the things that make our peacock feathers go up, are the things that we really worked hard on, things that caused us to overcome obstacles, things that caused us to really have to dig in for a minute. So that's the end of the webinar, guys, right? That's productive struggle. It's been fun. It's been 7 minutes in the making. Here we are. That was it. So no, but in reality, that's it, right? This is what productive struggle is about, is how do we create opportunities for students to do just that, to have this moment of feeling of accomplishment for them. So let's dig in, let's define what productive struggle is so that we know that we are all speaking the same language. So let's talk about what productive struggle is. So when we talk about productive struggle is an effortful process. So particularly in mathematics, we'll focus in on mathematics. It's an effortful process where students are working through challenging problems to develop a deeper understanding of math. It's not about getting answers right quickly, but instead it's about making sense of the math, right? It's not about struggling aimlessly, but it's about working through challenges that push students' thinking forward. So when students are grappling with math ideas, that's when they're developing stronger reasoning skills, they're making meaningful connections, and that's when they're gaining confidence. Principles to Actions states that with effective teaching, they have those 8 effective teaching practices. They say that effective teaching consistently provides students with opportunities and support to engage in productive struggle as they grapple with mathematical ideas and relationships, right? It's about what leads to real understanding and not just memorization. So it's important, that last line there. It's about engaging with problems that are just beyond your current ability, but within reach, something that's within reach of students. So some resources that are helpful if you want to learn more about productive struggle, just kind of so you know some of the research base that we use. Principles to Action is always our go-to because it's a great collection of all of the best research around math. We use the 5 practices around orchestrating productive math discussions in the classroom. The Teaching Gap is an oldie but a goodie. And then cognitive science for educators is a way to really understand what the science is, the brain science is, in a way that is accessible for those of us who are not cognitive scientists. Understanding that with productive struggle, that where the learning happens is within the struggle. Oftentimes we think that struggle is a roadblock to learning. The story I always tell is that when I was in the classroom, I would often walk to the front of the class and I would look around, I'd see a student standing there, like doing nothing. And I'd be like, why aren't you working? They're like, I don't have a pencil. And I'd be like, what happened to your pencil? And they're like, well, it's currently sitting in your ponytail there, Miss Jones. Like, it's because I was standing there, standing over them, helping them. And all of a sudden, instead of letting them struggle, I grabbed the pencil out of their hand. I started doing the work for them. And all of a sudden, I held on to their pencil. So when we think about where the learning happens, it happens within that struggle, right? Allowing them to practice that struggle allows them to engage in the math in meaningful ways. It produces the mathematical strength and perseverance, and it allows them to own the work themselves. It allows them to own the mathematical thinking themselves. So think about something that you struggled to learn at first, but now do with ease. So if you are willing, go ahead and throw into the chat something that you struggled to learn at first, but now do with ease. Sharice is an excellent line dancer. I can vouch for that. Uh, Sometimes it's easy to think outside of math and maybe even outside of education altogether. Crocheting, chess, oh, sewing, yeah. Quilting. Donna, did you just finish the queen quilt? The butterfly. Does anybody here know how to parallel park? We oftentimes talk about driving analogies. So if we think about parking and productive struggle, I used to live in the city and I had to parallel park every day when I get home. And I remember learning to parallel park, right? At first, learning to parallel park is ridiculous, right? You can't watch somebody else parallel park and know how to parallel park. You got to get in the car and do it. But it is a struggle, right? There's a lot to keep track of. There's angles. You got to watch your mirrors, the speed. You got to pay attention to the car behind you. You might misjudge the distance you have to adjust, and you might misjudge it a couple times. You may kiss the car behind you a couple of times. But with practice and feedback, like you got to turn the wheel or have somebody telling you where to go, then you can become very, very good at this, where you get home from work and you whip into your parking spot in front of your house really, really quickly, right? But you can achieve it. It's challenging, but you can achieve it. What productive struggle is, it's within reach, it's effortful, and it builds persistence. What it is not is something that lacks clarity or appropriate support. It prevents you from making progress, or it leads to frustration and disengagement. So with that kind of baseline understanding, I'm going to pass it over to my buddy John, who's going to talk about seeing it in the classrooms.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. So when we think about our students, and I want you to think for a moment about the following 4 items. If you can go to that next slide. Both the student actions and behaviors that are tied to these. So first off, looking at resilience and perseverance, but also critical thinking, confidence, and independence, and a deep understanding of retention. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds just to scan through those, but we're going to look at what those look like in the elementary and middle and high school world as well. Always give proper wait time. We can go ahead and go on to that next one. Thank you. So one of the things that I want to highlight is struggling with productive struggle and what that looks like. With this job that I've had, I've been lucky enough to be in classrooms over hundreds over the past 3 years. And these 5 components stand out as kind of within classrooms and within students, those that are struggling to productive struggle. So when you think about a desire for immediate answers, the proverbial, hey, is this right? As soon as students finish, the low frustration tolerance, fear of making mistakes, and we see that in the students' faces as they start to try and answer. It's also the lack of persistence and that over-reliance on help. I want you to look through those 5 and in the chat, write down which one maybe is the most evident with the current students that you're teaching. And I'll give you a minute just to chat in the chat, just which one of those is highlighted the most. And absolutely, I see a lot of the common themes. And as you're typing those, I'm going to share the over-reliance on help. My first year of teaching, I logged maybe many miles a day in my classroom because I would be running around answering those quick questions. And I learned after looping with my students how that was not helpful to them. So it was kind of living in that productive struggle. We're to look at opportunities that students have that. I see a lot of fear of making mistakes as well. Thank you all. So going to the next section, I want to look at what does productive struggle look like in K through 5, so the elementary world. If you are in Chicago by me, K to 5 buildings don't really, it's K to 8, so definitely talk with that. But we're going to look at high school in a little bit. But with struggle by itself, like Amy mentioned, it's not necessarily beneficial. So we want to look at opportunities and space that we provide for productive struggle. And I want to look at two scenarios, one kinder and one in 5th grade. So if you think about kindergarten, if we have some teachers, please let us know, any kindergarten teachers out there. One of the activities I've seen throughout multiple kinder classes is where students are asked to count quantities. And when you think about students initially counting quantities, I've seen students have counters on their table and they count them one at a time. And if you've seen kinder counting, you notice that they count the same items. And there's that mistake of, oh, you counted that item twice or 3 times. And we're going to talk about our resource with Amy a little bit later, but letting students do that, and that's okay. And you get to see them figure out better strategies. And when you think about students counting, absolutely, that cardinality, they start to come up with better strategies. And you've seen they'll group in 10s or groups in 5s on their own, or they'll take those counters and put them in a cup so they're not repeating that counting. And it's great to see, but it really relies on the teacher to step back to see those. Another, at the other tail end of elementary that we see is within geometry. One of my favorite activities is looking at rectangular prisms and volume. And a lot of the want is to jump to those formulas early on. And when we think about those formulas early on of length times width times height, we want to give students that opportunity to try to build those early on, to see what those actually mean. And one of the activities within our resource, and I know we have a couple people in the chat that use our resource for elementary, is the building of rectangular prisms and letting students struggle with that. So one of my favorite activities that I've seen students do is if you look at the 2 rectangular prisms in that image, you can probably picture which one students can build really easily. And you can probably see which one, when they try to build, will fall apart multiple times. And it is great to see them fall apart and rebuild those items. And allowing space for that so they can make those connections is key. When we look past this a little bit, and again, there's opportunities for those across all grade levels. If we jump to the next section, this I had a really long conversation with Charisse, who's going to be talking later on today. But when we think about productive struggle and identifying where those can be in activities and games and how that can encourage it, and I want you to think a little bit about either your students that you have or kids you might have that play video games and how much they ask you for help. I'll let you think about that for a second, because I have never, or rarely, I should say, seen a child ask an adult for help with video games. They figure those out. They productively struggle consistently through those. So as you're thinking about that, the activities that students use and the manipulatives they're using are so vital in allowing them to productively struggle. One of the things that we really want to look at is, are we allowing for opportunities for them to see different representations so they have different ways to show that math? One of my favorite ones being in a classroom I was in Springfield, Illinois. If you see one of the activities that shows modeling fractions, I watched a class, and as they were modeling fractions, I saw a couple things happen. students were able to get they had a little toolbox of their own, and they were able to look through it and see which tools they wanted to use. And others were looking around the room for resources they know they had used with their teacher. So really thinking about, do we allow students opportunities to do math in different ways so they have ways to productively struggle and identify those? I want you to think for a second, as you're thinking about your class, again, K to 12, what different strategies in the math topic you might be teaching now might lend itself to different strategies for them to solve. So just in the chat, share some of those. What are some of the current math topics you're on? And as you type those in the chat, just think to yourself, are students able to model this in different ways? Give you a minute just to type in the chat. And that lets us know what grade level we might be teaching too, gives us a hint into that. And I see Shauna has division. Division is a huge one. I just think back to the punishment I had with the standard algorithm and only the standard algorithm. Excellent. Got trigonometry and algebraic expressions. Perfect. That leads us in well to our next portion. Thank you all for sharing and continue to do so. This leads into as we look to 6 through 12. So as we look to 6 through 12, and as students get to middle and high school, we want to look for identifying space for productive struggle. And knowing that we may have students that have experienced this coming to us, or that this might be the first time they've had the opportunity to productive struggle. And the reason you'll notice where it says the quickest path is not always the best path in bold is because shortcuts can sometimes limit that productive struggle when we present those first. So thinking back to that resilience and perseverance, the critical thinking and instilling confidence in students, really thinking about the opportunities you give them. And Glennon, you said it perfectly. Fast math is not better math. And I love that. And I hope that sticks with you, because when you think about the opportunities we give to students, one of the big things is analyzing correct and incorrect examples so they can really critically think about the process and not just the answer. And other opportunities such as sorting, comparing, and reasoning. But lastly, the collaborative portion with peers. When we think about building confidence within students, that's such an important strategy to help them build confidence, because they can reason that with their peers as opposed to whole group a little bit earlier. And lastly, is embracing misconceptions and incorrect answers. Sometimes there's a want to shield some of those items, and shout out me. I'll take that, Glennon. But when we think about misconceptions, they're an opportunity to reflect on those. And a lot of the times when we see misconceptions, we want to, Amy said this in another meeting we had, we want to mow those out of the way, but that's not the case. Misconceptions can be a driver of productive struggle, and highlighting these and learning from them is so important. And before I hand this off to Robert, I want you to just think about what is something you might be able to do to build your students' stamina when it comes to productive struggle, because we know they're coming to us in various spots. So just think about that, and I'm going to throw it to Robert.
Okay, thank you, John. Everyone hear me okay?
Great.
Thumbs up. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yes, I do a great Obama impression because, he was our president for 8 years. And, I was looking up for a step up in my career, U.S. Senator, U.S. President, following that, math teacher. Because Michelle knows that kind of out of a job here after 8 years in the Oval Office. I love my Obama impression. I love being here with you. Thanks so much for this opportunity to be here. Welcome to the Math Stream Studios here in Rose City, Portland, where we've been making this program for the past several years. And it's my honor to be with all these teachers. I was reading the chat and listening to the talk, how honored I am to share notes with you, people who are like-minded with me. It's my time to talk about turning math anxiety into math confidence. And I'm going to tell you what happened a few weeks ago when I was sitting with a third grade student, and I gave him this riddle. And I said, okay, please split this shape into 4 identical shapes that have the same area and look all the same. And off he went. And before he started, I said, this took me 25 minutes. So I let that be known. And so he started to go and go. And then he looked at me. And I smiled without saying a word, and I went like this. And then he did that, and then he looked at me again. And then without saying a word, I smiled, nodded, and I did this, and this, and this, and this. I'm signaling to him that the process requires work without even saying it. When those students look at us, when they have these potential feelings of fear, nervousness, anxiety, those can descend unchecked into feelings of isolation. Isolation, there you go. Right? And the antidote to anyone feeling isolated when they don't know what to do next and they feel alone through these struggles is us. We, as the teachers, people are the antidote to feelings of isolation. And what we're going to do over the next several minutes, I'm going to show you how I help establish a culture, not only with the students in my classroom, but with my kids at home, to let them know that not only can they confront these and move past them, but what can we do to actually not bring these up in the first place? How to sidestep these feelings of nervousness, frustration, anger, and so forth, right? It has to be taught. A culture of productive struggle must be taught to them. They need to understand. Starting with those students, of course, that don't like math, right? We have to talk about these. The ones that I've heard many times over the years say, Mr. Dude, I just don't like math. I hate math, they would say. And so my response to them is, well, what's 5 plus 5? And they would say 10. And I would say, do you hate that 5 plus 5 is 10? And they would say no. So I said, okay, somewhere after 5 plus 5 equals 10 and before where we lost you is when you develop the dislike. So maybe don't not like the math, but just not like not knowing. So that's what we can do. We can talk about how to seek out the perfect challenge. Where was it after 5 plus 5 that we lost you? Scaling back to words like easy. If there's one thing that you take from me, it is my dream that all teachers around the world get rid of this concept of the word easy in our lexicon. Basically, we don't want to use words like, oh, don't worry, class, this part's easy. You got this part's easy. First of all, not everything is easy to everyone. And secondly, the goal is not easy. The goal is the right challenge. Same with phrases like stupid mistakes. Oh, I made a stupid mistake. Many students say this, and I prohibit them from any negative self-talk when it comes to their learning. That's the culture that we're talking about. No negative self-talk allowed. You could say small mistakes, you could say careless mistakes, even silly mistakes, but take the word stupid out of your language. Now, have you ever seen a student focus on a problem in that productive struggle and they start to check out, right? You've been around enough kids to know this is what it looks like. When I see that in students, I remind them of the Olympic weightlifting event known as the deadlift to overhead press. And I said, this is your brain right now. We don't want deadlift when it comes to math learning, when you're doing so many calculations, you're having such a high load to bear all at once. Remove all the weights off the bars, lift only the bar, and take deadlift thinking out of math learning. We want to do that by what I call throwing rocks to step across the creek. Students love these types of cultural concepts. This is a phrase that I use with students. Growing up in Maryland, there'd be a little creek, let's say, and here we were as little kids, and you can't just leap across the creek, much like you can't just solve a problem instantly. So we would talk about how we used to throw big rocks, splash, into the creek. And then from there, you'd throw another one, splash, and then you just hop across and get to the other side. So John, you mentioned this concept of drawing shapes like prisms. That's what I do. Whenever I see the student in that deadlift phase, I would say, what can you throw? Is there a stone you can throw? Is there a stone you could throw? What's your prism drawing game like? You know how many students I've talked to about how to draw a prism? Here, start with that. And they just play around with drawing it, talking about parallel lines. The idea must be taught. It's extending the life of learning moments, right? In having that comfort in the realm of the unknown. These are the ways that work for me, right? Starting with these types of phrasings. Opposite of the disengaged, checked out kid, you have that one that's dialed in. You know that look on their face, that this goes something like this. When I see that, I let them know that that's where we want them to be. I'll catch them in it. I'll say, nice, this is what we want. Good, this is good. This is where you need to be. I want them to know that that is almost a lost art, the art of extended deep thought. We want that body language. Whenever students are thinking and maybe thinking out loud and doing it in my presence, do you know how often I'm nodding? I'm nodding constantly because I'm letting them know this is the antithesis of isolation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not giving answers. I'm just there for them in this moment. It's almost like a rhythm. We're holding energy with each other, all these positive gesturing. Same with use of silence. Have you ever had a student ask you, is it negative? Right, this is what John was talking about like they want that instant gratification. They want those questions. When a student's like, no, positive, positive. I have no problem with silence. Oh, yeah. It sounds like you're thinking. I'm just giving you a chance to think. Yeah, please proceed. I don't, with respect, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm just going to let you keep thinking. Like, give them that onus, but let them know that you're still there for them. And never let them apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. They have no need to apologize. Students, you have no need to apologize for your learning. Just say that you're figuring it out, right? Well, and that's my time to wrap it up. Got my timer. Finally, I'm gonna talk about this. Let's be those teachers that sidebar all the time. Sometimes teachers say, oh, you didn't learn this last year. You're supposed to know this. Let's not be those teachers. I call it kicking the can down the road, right? Take them aside and let's do practicing square roots or anything that they need to know. Let them know that we'll be there for them, right? And then celebrate milestones. That's one of the reasons why these students love video games so much, because there's constant feedback loops. Let's say, for example, if they're going to do a 6-part problem, like all 6 trig functions of a certain angle, what's the sine of pi over 2? What's the cosine of pi over 2? I'll do that with fingers to let them know. Sine of pi over 2, nice. 1 down, 5 to go. Cosine pi over 2, nice. 2 down, 4 to go. I'll say things like rock, oh, boss. 4 down, or I can't count. 5 down, 1 to go. Things like that. Letting them know that feedback exists to extend those learning moments and celebrate milestones. They love check marks of just saying, try it as an experiment. Let's say you're looking at their work and they finally surmounted a mountain. They figured out a problem. So without a word, keep it going to let them know that they can remember these moments that they climbed the mountain, they got it. Lifelines. This is the part where I'm borrowing from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the old game show, where let's say the student is ready to be independent, wants to do that productive struggle, but wants to do so, let's say, within the safety of having a teacher around or their friends around. So I would say, you can ask me any question you want the second you get lost, and I will answer it. Those are called lifelines. How many lifelines do you think you need? There is no wrong answer. And they would say 3. And I would say 3 granted, go. So now they know that they're working independently, but if they hit the wall, they can ask questions. And then they want to challenge themselves, they'll go to 2, then 1. And finally, what I'll end on is this. Students need to know that they were able to accomplish something. Sometimes they're just so into the next problem. What's the next thing, the next thing? It's our job to culturally bring them into that space and say, remember you were struggling with this? You figured it out. So you're telling me that you know how to figure out difficult problems? We have evidence on your paper right here, okay? Please remember this moment is what we can say to them. Basically, yes, it's important what we're teaching them, but what we can do to enhance that confidence is to think about how we're teaching them. All right, thanks for rocking with me. On to the next one. Is it Charisse?
Is it Charisse? It's me.
Yes. Yes, Charisse.
All
I'm ready
right.
for yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. So at this point, you've heard some pretty big key points here. So you've heard John talk about collaboration, and you heard Robert talk about people and the culture. And so I want to go ahead, Katie, to the next slide for me. So let's talk about what does this actually look like for teacher-student partnership. So I want to first lean in on our fourth guiding principle that says education is a human endeavor. So this is going to actually take both the teacher, some things that I should do, and then what should I see my students do. So as a teacher, if I have to prepare for these, so there's that preparation thing. But let's go with the first bullet. I've got to be able to anticipate what is it that my students, how might they answer? What are some of the possible things they may say? Next bullet, Katie. Thank you. Just hit them all. So at this, I also need to be able to give them time. And so I'm going to lean in on bullet number 2, because this is where sometimes we as teachers, we don't give students enough time to be able to actually think about their thinking. The third bullet is where we want to be able to facilitate and discuss. Notice I didn't say that we're going to be the givers of information, but being able to facilitate and ask students the right questions. And then thinking about what Robert mentioned about the praise. We want to praise students' progress. No, they didn't get to the final answer because they're not there yet, but can I praise what they've done in the process? And as we're doing those things as teachers, here is what we should see our students doing. We should see them struggling. And I think John mentioned what we say, it is a struggle to stop the struggle, right? I have to be able to say, nope, I'm going to continue to ask them the right questions and facilitate a discussion so that I can get them to where they need to be. Next bullet, please. Again, asking the right questions related to the source of their struggle. Next, and then actively engaged in their effort. I think one of my panelists here mentioned something about students being showing the effort. And then finally, back to that collaboration and them being able to collaborate without telling. But this goes back to something that Robert mentioned about making sure that your environment is sustainable for these types of things to happen. Next slide. So how do we encourage the productive struggle? Students should be able to ask themselves these 3 questions each time that they're in your class and you give them something to do. What is this problem or task even asking me to do? And what is my plan for answering it? What tools might I need to be able to solve this particular problem or task? And does my answer even make sense? Typically, if we give students a naked math problem, they don't necessarily know if their answer even makes sense, right? So teacher actions, next slide. In order for my students to be able to answer the question of what is this problem even asking me, there are some things I have to do as a teacher. I've got to be able to use problems or tasks that promote their reasoning. We often need to think about things like low floor, high ceiling. Can everybody get in to be able to reason a little bit? And that lets me know who's struggling and who ain't struggling. Next. Asking students to explain and or justify, explain how they got to their answer rather than us, just telling them, and again, being that giver of information. And again, that justification piece of it. Okay. And then finally, giving our students an opportunity to discuss. And then this goes back to that collaborative environment, being intentional about creating a space for students to discuss the mathematics. I think sometimes us as teachers, we have to remember we want less of us and more of them. Next slide. What tools do I need to be able to solve? If I think back to what John was talking about and students being able to just use some of the resources around them, think about student agency, being able to have diagrams, sketches. We've oftentimes moved away from models, but models have been what students can lean on to help in their thinking. And then finally, anchor charts. And then I'm just going to keep saying it to you you have to be able to have an environment that allows students to know that mistakes are okay and that it is okay to talk to the person next to them. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is a good one. Does my answer even make sense? So again, when you're asking students to explain their thinking, notice I put their reasoning. It's not how I would reason through the problem, but more or less how are my students going to reason? And then finally, again, being able to give students the space to collaborate, but you have to be able to establish clear expectations from the very beginning. Then you'll notice in that second bullet where we say mistakes are expected. They should know that mistakes are okay. And then how do we progress the learning? All right, and so with that, next slide, please. I am going to pass it to Amy to talk about how do we support.
Sure. Those are all great tips, Sharice. I appreciate how you laid them out. There are some requests in the chat of like, hold on, I want to be able to write some of those down. You will get these slides so that you can take notes on them, because one of the things that we know is so important is having the right resources so that you're not building all of these for yourself every day as you go. And as we think about our instructional model, we really want to think about how we build in the tools so that you have them at your fingertips. As we think about our teaching cadence, we often talk about the teach, and then pause for a minute. In our elementary product, what that looks like is we have some concept lessons, and then we pause for what's called a re-engagement lesson to give students a chance to think for a minute to what they've been doing in the concept lessons and re-engage for a minute. In our secondary product, we have math book lessons, and then they pause to work in Mathia. It's the same idea where this unfinished learning, it is okay. Creating this culture where it's okay. You don't have to get it right on the first go. It is expected for you to pause in the normal everyday cadence of learning. Within each lesson, we have a structure to the lessons, a 3-part lessons that guide that meaningful struggle. So this lesson cycle, again, are all the way beginning in kindergarten, all the way up through Algebra 2, move students from how do we activate their thinking, how do we engage them in learning that gets them in that low floor, high ceiling thought at the very beginning, and then dive them deep into activities that allow them to work and collaborate and reason and think through that middle chunk of a lesson. And then at the end of each lesson, to pause, to think, to reflect. What have I learned? Where am I on this path? Am I still struggling? And that's okay. How confident am I? Where am I? And building those pieces in as a normal part of everyday routine so that students expect it, so that you expect it as a teacher, that it is the everyday part of the routine that kids just know as part of the normal everyday math class. Here's an example from our elementary product. This is from 2nd grade, where students are just playing with some addition puzzles in the beginning of 2nd grade. So you can see this is right at the beginning of them building fluency within 20. So they're figuring out puzzles with 2 within 2, and then the puzzles in the explore phase then build out to 4, and they have to think about some different connections within those puzzles. At the end with the reflect, that is what we call a my just right problem. And so not only are we asking students to solve those problems, but we're also asking them to then color in some stars to tell us which of those problems felt just right to them. So we can also just take a quick pulse check on where their confidence is as well, because that's an important part of just recognizing that there might have been a struggle today. And you might have been a kid that had no struggle last time, but you're struggling today, and that's okay. Here's an example from secondary. In this example, I think this came up in the chat earlier. So in the beginning part of this lesson, students are looking at these images and just beginning to get their feet wet in the task. And if you'll notice in the middle, they both have an opportunity that you probably can read this very clearly because the font is so large and clear on this slide. But on the first page there's there's a worked example. So there's something that for students to analyze. But then on the right-hand side, you might see a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So the opportunity to analyze, correct, and incorrect, that type of peer analysis is also something that is really, really valuable as students are making sense of mathematics. And then an opportunity for students to reflect on their thinking through the demonstrate phase. So those are an example of what we have in our materials. Throughout all of them, we want to move students from their intuitive understanding of the world, how they can make sense of, use concrete things that they can touch, and move them to whatever the abstract expectations are, grade level expectations for mathematics. So we want to think about how we can continually move kids along that continuum. So as we, again, another example in 4th grade, as we move kids in understanding multiplication, so we move from a concrete area model into a representational, where they're moving to what we call a cross number puzzle, and then into partial products. So we want to move them through this process, again, build it in for the teachers so that you can spend your time doing all of the things that Robert and Charisse talked about to bring it to life, to support your students, instead of spending your time searching for the resources. And then in another example, one of my favorites in middle school is having students get up and figure out how to walk up and down a number line as they're learning to add and subtract integers as a way to make sense of the rules that we want them to physically feel in their bodies as they're beginning to work with the full scope of the number line. One of the things that I love to think about oftentimes in all of these problems is how we compare them to playgrounds. I've got young children myself, and I think about the playground and that balance of freedom and structure. I have one child who insists on going up the slides, and the other child who insists on enforcing the rules that you always must go down the slide. And they are just so fun to have at the playground together. And the nice thing about it is that I can just send them off, and they can struggle together and figure out how they want to play together. And it just gives them enough structure. And my third child just kind of runs around and plays in the dirt and does whatever the heck she wants to do. And that's the kind of experience we want to have for kids in math class, because they are naturally curious. They want to make sense of the world, and we want to provide just the right tools that will challenge them, that will support exploration, and build a deep mathematical understanding. And the struggle, that's where the learning and the magic happens. So
All
back
right.
to you, Charisse.
Back to me. All right, so let's take a moment to do a bit of a reflection. So here, why students need and want to productively struggle? So here's a letter from Emma. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds. Hopefully, I'll give you a little bit. I think we got 45 seconds for you to go ahead and just kind of peruse through this for a moment. So I'm going to assume that's 45 seconds. Don't at me. But I do want to emphasize the students' persistence, the struggle, and then the eventual like I got it moment, right? So just giving them that space, they're going to thank you later, right? Next slide, please, Katie. So here's what I want you to think about. Who is your Emma? So think of the students in your classroom this year, right? What helped one or more of them to push through the struggles? What more could you do to support those students? Think about some of the things that I mentioned in my part of it, or that we all have mentioned, which we talked about collaboration. And what we'd like for you to do right now is to add one word or phrase to the chat that's going to describe what you plan to do more of to assist your students with productive struggle and in the power of yet. Go ahead and drop that in the chat for us. Believe in them. I love that. Ask more, tell less. I'm telling you, it works. Less of you, more of them. Silence is golden. Wait time. Those are all. Facilitate more. Remember this moment. Be comfortable. Yes, silence makes us uncomfortable. Even this, I'm getting a little nervous. I'm like, what do we have next? I'm kidding. All right. And so thank you so much for those of you that shared. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Katie. If you're still here, you're in for an awesome challenge. Katie?
All right. As promised, if you're still here, we have an awesome challenge coming up. So we're really excited. You are the first to hear about this challenge. We will be rolling it out to everyone that was on, anyone watching the recording, but we are thrilled to be able to introduce our Power of Yet challenge. So here's how it works. Starting right now, today, all the way through March 14th, which is Pi Day, you can participate by downloading our bingo card. We're going to drop that in the chat for you. If you complete a row, column, or diagonal of activities, you have a bingo. How do you submit this? You are going to simply post your bingo on social media. You can tag Carnegie Learning with the hashtag Power of Yet Challenge, or you could email your completed bingo card to powerofyetchallenge@carnegielearning.com. The rules and all of the things that you need to know are also on this bingo card that you can download. So you don't have to write down furiously everything I'm saying. But the best part, one lucky winner will receive an all expenses paid trip to our annual TNI event. So if you have never been to TNI, look it up. It's great. It's fabulous. It's the best professional learning. This is just a sliver of what you get today's hour. There's all kinds of things you'll be able to take away. You get an opportunity to be pampered, relaxed, refreshed. It's an awesome, awesome experience, a great event. I actually went to it as a teacher and I had such a wonderful time and such a wonderful learning experience. So this is a great opportunity to engage your students, spark some meaningful conversation, and win an amazing prize. Embrace the power of yet right now, and let's get started. And with that, I'm just going to kind of wrap us up here. And I want to just remind you, just take a moment to shout out Carnegie Learning and Yay Math. So at Carnegie Learning, our mission is simple: to make grade level learning accessible to every single student. We can achieve this by drawing on nearly 30 years of research and proven efficacy. We've created solutions that meet the needs of today's learners. Our AI-powered personalized learning pathways ensure that each and every student receives the targeted support that they deserve, while our high-quality instructional materials provide rigor that is necessary to engage and challenge all students. We don't stop there. Our professional learning services empower educators with the strategies that they need to elevate their teaching and impact student success. With Carnegie Learning, every student has the opportunity to thrive. And how about Yay Math? Shout out to Robert. Thanks so much for being here today. Yay Math brings math to life with engaging, real-world video lessons that inspire students to embrace challenges and build confidence. Founded by Robert, Yay Math fosters a supportive learning environment where mistakes are celebrated as part of the journey to understanding. So join the movement today and make math meaningful, fun, and accessible for all. Use this QR code to sign up for the mailing list. And that brings me to my very heartfelt thank you. Every single person on here believes that every student can succeed in math with the right support, mindset, and tools. Through our partnership with Yay Math, we are reinforcing the power of perseverance and confidence, helping students see challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to grow. I want to thank you again for joining us in this mission. We appreciate your time, your dedication, and every single thing that you do to inspire learning every day. Thank you.